Alistair MacKinnon, now Managing Director of NIVUS UK, explains his reasons for joining the company, with the major pull being its reputation for innovation across a whole range of flow and other instrumentation technologies. He also offers some fascinating insights into the challenges faced by the water companies, the Environment Agency and other industry stakeholders, with climate change and negative headlines the main two issues to address.
Okay, so many will know you for a long career in the water industry, and quite a lot of that spent with Pulsar, but you have moved on to pastures new with NIVUS, and I guess I'm not saying it's time for you to retire, but it's interesting be good to understand why you decided to make a move at this stage of your career as opposed to seeing out your time there or whatever.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Phil. And nobody was more surprised than I was, I suppose. But all joking aside, you have, I think, in your career path, you have two ways of approaching it. One is to look at moving between companies to progress your career. Another one is to stick with a company. I stuck with a young company at the time. It was a risk, but I had 25 years of great times. Grew with that company into the global director of sales. But I think when you actually get to a position, and there is unfortunately a ceiling there, you have to look. And more closer to retirement than starting when I was an apprentice. But you have to look at moving forward. And I'm an ambitious person still. I have known NIVUS for many years. I was in fact the key account manager at Pulsar selling into NIVUS for some of the products. So I have great respect for them, great respect for the founder, Udo Steppi, and kind of the stars aligned, really. Udo and NIVUS were looking for an MD to drive the UK business forward. It's done very well, very good team, and I'm lucky to join that team and direct it to its next stage in its growth. I just thought, I've always wanted to, you don't turn down a director's role, managing director's role, and it was my next step, and that's the way I went, really. So 25 years. Most people, a lot of people said on LinkedIn when I put in that I was moving, you're a lifer, crikey, what? But it happens, and I've been accepted into NIVUS very well, and it's 6 months now, past the probation period, so I'm here to stay.
Yeah, and in terms of the name, I mean, NIVUS. I suspect most people are fully aware of the companies, but and it might be a bit harsh to describe that, but to call it a sleeping giant is perhaps unfair. But maybe people are more familiar with the name than necessarily all the things that the company does, the technology. So it'd be good perhaps to, is that a fair description? But also, do tell us, the full range of what the company does actually get up to.
Yeah, it is a fair reflection on NIVUS. NIVUS, I would say, are the Rolls-Royce of flow. I came from a company that supplied mainly level, but were into the flow side of it. But NIVUS very much are known for very accurate flow meters, and I would say a sleeping giant. They've got great potential, and we want to move that forward. NIVUS started over 50 years ago. And again, like I mentioned, the founder, Udo Steppi, he was based in a place called Eppingen, which is about 50 kilometers away from the French border, so southwest Germany, and built up a good business from that point of view, developed some really good flow techniques, which gave accurate measurement to the industry in difficult applications as well. And we've got the really good ability to grow. and the portfolio is excellent. We have cross correlation techniques, transit time techniques, into closed pipe, half fill pipe applications, open channel, and river monitoring is one of the big things that we do, and we lead that in the UK. We do a lot of river monitoring for the Environment Agency. To give you an idea, and this is the things that people, and I didn't realise before I joined NIVUS, of what we do. We look at gauging stations across maybe 20-30 meter rivers. In fact, we're just going to put one in next month, the 28 path transit time, and these have to be accurate because you're looking at abstraction from the river network, all these type of things, yeah, it's we can expand that. We can expand that globally as well. We do push it within the UK, and we've got probably around about 250 points in the river network, as well as looking at discharge from the utilities. So the utilities, I think we're known kind of more into the utility industry, but we do a lot in the for the Environment Agency and measuring there as well.
Okay, I mentioned of rivers. I mean, we'll go back to or look in more detail at what some of the technologies NIVUS does and for some of the customers. But we can't perhaps have a conversation without talking about the state of the water industry at the moment.
Yeah.
Sadly, it tends to be in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. And I'm just one. I mean, I don't want you to say anything controversial you regret. But in terms of just how you see the industry, do you think deserving of the negative headlines, but also what role, because it seems to me that government and legislation is the starting point for all this, and everything that sort of subsequently happens is as a direct result of reacting to either legislation that exists or an absence of regulation, shall we say. So just any thoughts as to how you see the industry in terms of maybe the mess it's got itself into, or how would you describe the current scenario?
Yeah, it's a good question. It has to come up, really. Firstly, let me go back in history, okay? And I'm going to age myself here, unfortunately. I started supplying into the water industry before privatization, so that kind of does show you how sort of I'm more to the retirement age than I am to the apprenticeship age. But I'll sort of go through that timeline for me. Before privatization, and people probably don't know that, if social media was around, they'd be going absolutely bonkers before privatization, because the rivers weren't very good at all. So there was a lot of investment put in for the first few amps, and that investment was done in the right way. It did allow the spills into the rivers, long sea outfalls, these sort of things to be treated. And we went into probably around about the second or the third amp into some very clean rivers and water courses. In fact, I don't know if again people remember, there was talk about salmon migrating up the Thames, which was fantastic. It was really good. Unfortunately, I think the eye's been taken off the ball a little bit. And again, I'm not going to get political here, over the past few amps, and money, I think, hasn't been invested into the right places. But I am optimistic. We've now seen that we are, and the social media is rife and it's around the place, and rightly so. Some high profile people have been complaining about this, bring it into the headlights. And I truly believe that the investment that's coming forward will be invested into the right places. Initially, to monitor, you have to monitor before you can fix. We're doing that now with EDMs, CSOs. They're going to go into the water quality side of it for the rivers. Again, another controversial thing. Who pays for that? It looks like it's going to fall on the water industry's door again. And it's a massive commitment. But what we have to do is, I think after that, we have to get the infrastructure right. again. We have to invest in that infrastructure, putting large tanks in, treating more of the wastewater. And if we can do that, I'm really optimistic we get back to where we were in the first few AMPs.
I mean, strikes me, and this isn't a point about Brexit in Europe, but in the early days of privatisation, we had massive pieces of EU legislation. There was the Bathing Water Directive, the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. So there were very obvious things that the water companies had to respond to. Is part of the problem that there aren't, if you like, those headline things, and therefore there's a lot of different things competing, as opposed to saying, you know, there's this massive bit of legislation we've all got to work with. Do you think that's had any impact?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a it's kind of where do you turn? Where do you focus? Again, there's investment there, and it's how you focus on which part of the investment you focus on, or which where do you put that investment? I think having spent quite a bit of time over the past few months attending certain seminars and conferences, I think the industry has got it right, and they are looking at it. They're listening. They're listening to where things have happened before. I was at a conference yesterday, and there was a talk from somebody from the Netherlands, and they were going through some of the pitfalls and everything, and there was people within the industry there from the water industry listening, taking that on board. And I think they'll focus and they'll invest into the right places. But you can't have that shotgun approach. You've got to focus and go for the rifle shots and get the big wins. If you get the big wins, you get people on side. You see the public starting to engage, these type of things. I think it will happen. I really do.
And one of the areas of focus, I think, is the proposed continuous water quality program. So can you know, maybe for those that don't know, explain what it is, and also your thoughts as to, you know, what impact that will hopefully have?
Yeah. I mean, we are predominantly flow, as I've explained, but we've got a vested interest in that because we're monitoring through the MCerts banner. We do a lot of work with our products, and we have a big part of our portfolio MCerted. So we do a lot of the outfalls and monitor the flow from the outfalls of the treatment plants. We also monitor the rivers, so we look at the flows from that side. It's a big headache for the water industries to do that. The agency and the government have put out the regulations now, and if you read those regulations, they are pretty onerous. And I think that what the water industries will do will come up with the supply chain with a solution which helps everybody. So effectively, you're going to have to monitor 500 meters upstream, and I think it's another 500 meters downstream of any outfall, whether that be a CSO, whether it be the outfall from an actual treatment plant. Some of this regulation is saying you need to put in a cabinet, you need to put in a sampler, you need to put these type of things. Massive investment, especially when you're talking about land and buying up some land to put these things in. I don't think many of the public would like to see a lot of these cabinets all down these lovely rivers, you know. So there will be a compromise, there will be innovation, and I'm sure that they'll deploy quite a lot of these things. My kind of concern, looking at it from a flow point of view, because again we do over 250 gauging stations for the agency, is that water quality does change depending on the flow of the river. So when you're monitoring, the flow could be quite low, the quality could be, you know, if there's a discharge, could be quite high, negatively high. But again, if the flow is fast and the velocity is fast, then the quality not so bad. So I think there might have to be it'd be lovely to see, but that variable for flow, as well as the quality, pH and the like. I'm not a quality person, but there's about 5 or 6 measurans that they've got to report on, I think you need to know what the flow of the river is as well at the same time. But it's a massive challenge to the industry. But I'm sure with investment and innovation, that challenge will be overcome.
And, we're going to come on to NIVUS, some things you've been up to, but just before we do that, yeah. I can't not ask you, because your experience in the industry has been very much international, so it'd be good maybe on a slightly more positive. You've talked about some of the problems the industry faces, but in terms of its position, as global standing, you've seen, I guess, the good, the bad, and the ugly across the world. So we tend to think that we lead the way in a lot of areas. Is that fair to say, or is that a bit of sort of British arrogance? How would you put our industry in perspective with all the other things that are going on around the world?
Yeah, I spent probably around about sort of 15 years of my previous career, traveling the world. My carbon footprint is down now, which is good, looking just after the UK. But I'll give you maybe a couple of examples of how we're perceived. I was over in Vietnam some years ago, and was in a meeting there with the water company, and they held their hands up and said, we only treat less than 20% of our wastewater. Now, the rest of it goes out as raw sewage, and you can say that about a number of the countries, third world countries, and that's happening. So, if you had a league table, we're not bottom and we are respected, and our ability to go out there and support and help. It wasn't that long ago that quite a lot of the UK water companies were going overseas to help and to give their experience to other countries, to other water companies as well. But if you look at, say, Northern Europe, so we looked at Vietnam there, they would certainly look up to what we've done and what we're doing, and take our experience from that side. But if you look at, say, something like Northern Europe, Scandinavia, smaller population, they don't have the big water companies, they still have the small communities, they pay the higher taxes, and they get things done. And you would probably put us a little bit below that from that side of it. And they do their monitoring, they do their treatment, and their quality is very good from that point of view. So it depends on where you are in the world, but we're still looked at. This monitoring program that we're doing, there's not many people that are doing that around the world. So yeah, we've got to be positive about that type of thing. People are still regard us as being the people to look at and to see what we're doing in the forefront of the industry.
And in terms of NIVUS, the company itself, it'd be good to understand. I know, again, it can be sensitive mentioning specific water company names or customer names, but it'd be great to understand some of the projects, the work, and technology innovations that are going, or recently announced, or are going on at the moment. If you can give us a sort of overview.
Yeah, I can. You have to innovate. If you don't innovate, you stagnate and you eventually die. So we understand that in NIVUS, and in Germany, the R&D department are working very hard. They've got a fantastic flow rig out in Germany where they can do all their testing on potentially new products, these type of things. So we're looking at. We talked about the river gauging, that side. I think it's a big part of our turnover within the UK. So it's great to see that Germany, the mothership, are actually seeing that, and they're looking at wireless solutions for that. If you put in a transit time into a river application, you've got some quite tricky techniques to get cabling from one side of the river to the other. You either go over or you go under. You can imagine sort of excavating and going under a river to put cabling in. A game changer would be to go wireless. There's no doubt about that. So kind of watch this space from that point of view. We've identified that, and that's something that will be coming around the corner. We also, very interestingly, we've developed a particle monitor. Now, within our cross correlation technique, we look at particles, we look at velocity shift, and the particles are something that we use to create that measurement, that accurate measurement. So now we're actually looking at those particles, the size of those particles, and the distribution of those particles. And we're kind of looking at that from a utility, a water industry perspective, but we've picked up quite a nice little market for ourselves in the hydropower industry, where the water from the rivers goes down, turns to turbines, to keep it basic, really. But that water can have a lot of particles in it, and they need to know what that particle distribution is, and to try and reduce that, to filter it out, to clean it. So we have a real-time particle distribution monitor that we've been testing out in India, in Switzerland, and we're going to be advertising at or the exhibition Hydropower 2023 at the end of this month. So that's an international show, but we'll be promoting it from within the UK. So quite exciting.
And I'm wondering as well, in terms of the roadmap, I mean, artificial intelligence seems to be here, there, and everywhere at the moment. You know, people are talking about it, and I'm just wondering whether that you see that has an expanded role to play. And also, I mean, data, clearly what you do produces vast amounts of data, and another potential trend, rather than you say we can do absolutely everything end to end, people are talking about collaboration. So you might be working with a couple of partners that have expertise in different bits of the, should we say, the data supply chain or whatever. Just any thoughts as to sort of AI and data analytics as to what might be around the corner?
Yeah, I mean, at NIVUS, we've identified that. Obviously, we've got outputs from all of our transmitters that will go into, we're agnostic in a way, it will go into whichever's data transmission and into anybody's portal. But we've got our own portal within, and a lot of companies are doing this now. They're producing their own web portal, looking at AI. We do level, but again, predominantly flow. But you look at these smart cities. We do a lot of work down in the Middle East on these smart cities and things, and to gather all this information back into the web portal. We've got probably around about 20 people in Germany working on this, and some fairly intelligent blokes and women looking at artificial intelligence as well. We haven't looked at teaming up with anybody, but that potentially could be something we look at down the line. I think data is great, but you know, the old adage, garbage in is garbage out. You've got to get that data, and you've got to get it at source. You've got to get it correctly. As I mentioned before, we are seen as the Rolls Royce when it comes down to flow, and we as a service team, as a sales team, have got a lot of knowledge on where to apply these bits of kit correctly. And if you get that right, then you know you've got the ability to get the data up and to do stuff, and then to let your AI companies do what they need to do with regard to potential blockages within the network and flow from the outfalls, flow from the river. It all combines, and there are smarter people than me that are looking at all this. I was at a conference yesterday, listening to a number of these data logging companies, companies that are taking all this information in, and it's very exciting. It's what you do with the data, though, at the end of the day, Phil, and that is the big challenge to the industry. Have we got enough people to look at this data? Do we need all that data? When you potentially look at modeling, you can sometimes have too much data or an overload of data where you've got maybe 4 or 5 points within a catchment area, but you might just need one measurement point rather than those 4 or 5. And there's a lot of work going on about that as well.
I'm just curious, I mean, bearing in mind what you've said there, in terms of a typical customer engagement, if there is such a thing, which I suspect there maybe isn't, but do you tend to get customers knock on the door and say, we want X, Y, and Z and you just blindly go, okay, yep, here we are, or we'll deliver it in 3 months? Or do you try to engage with the customer and say, well, you want this, can you explain to us why you want it, and then you can maybe help? I'm just wondering, how much customers think they know what they're doing and how much they would be better off relying on you to say, well, actually, don't do it that way, try this way instead. Or just thoughts as to how you work with your customers.
It's a really good question, and I've always been that way throughout my career, is questioning. Sometimes people say, well, why? I just want this, I know I want this, and a lot of times the customer is right, but I think they respect you if you do ask that question. And we do it a lot in NIVUS because it's critical where we're putting our instruments in, outfalls of rivers, all these type of things. M-Certs is a massive thing, and we work hand in glove with M-Certs inspectors, discussing things with them, with the end user as well. We do a lot of work with that. We've got frameworks around the UK from that point of view, and it'd be crazy if we didn't. And we will travel the length and breadth of the UK, going to see people, or on Teams, whatever, discussing that application. If you do that, it's well worth that time spent initially to get the right outcome eventually. People are very busy. It's sometimes difficult, but if you explain the reasons why, they understand that, and they'll give you as much information as possible for us to make that right decision and apply the right product to the application.
Yeah, and maybe finally, and perhaps an unfair question, because it's exercising everybody's intelligence, if you like, but climate change, I think everyone's got to the stage where they accept it's real, it's happening. But in terms of what the water industry is or isn't doing, just any thoughts you might have are you optimistic that if you like, the right path has been identified and points along there to get us to where we need to be, net zero 2050? Or do you worry that it's perhaps a little bit, there are too many stakeholders with slightly conflicting thoughts, or somebody needs to grab everyone by the collar and shake them and say, right, this is the direction of travel? Just to me it seems a bit chaotic, because the government sort of says it's heading there, and then you maybe think they're saying something that perhaps doesn't back that up. Any thoughts as to where the water industry is, where it needs to be, and who can help change it if they change?
Wow, it was that question you said before about the focus, wasn't it? That shotgun approach, or the focus and things, and that to me is the biggest overlying issue that we've got. We all talk about the quality of the rivers, these type of things. It's a massive thing, but boy oh boy, climate change, and we're all seeing it day after day. And I'm personally passionate about it. I do as much as I can. I don't think it was the actual primary decision for me not to get on a plane anymore, but I'm pleased that my carbon footprint has come down from changing jobs into NIVUS UK. But I think it's a massive challenge for the industry now. They've got all these type of other things. I mean, I think the supply chain has to help massively, and I think they are. You've got to think about your contractors, think about the pouring of concrete. How do we reduce the amount of concrete going into the ground? People want to do that because they want to mitigate the spills into the rivers. So there is a big balance on this side. You have to sort of think. I think when you're doing this and you're putting stuff out there and innovating every time, and I say this to a number of people, you have to have in the back of your mind that check to think, how is this going to impact from a climate change point of view as well? I think a lot of people within the industry are thinking about that as well. So we can innovate, we can solve problems, but we also have to have in the back of our minds how we're able to reduce the carbon footprint of what we're doing as well. We're doing it from a point of solar and wind. A lot of our developments, we're making low power as much as we can. So we can power via solar. We can power via wind turbines. So small wind turbines, small solar panels, by the rivers, powering things, whatever we're measuring. And I think, again, if the industry can do that, it allows us to sort of start to reach that net zero at some stage. I'm pretty convinced that it'll be nice to get there in the timeline, but I think there might be a little bit of offsetting as well in the future. But yeah, I think if we can think strongly about that when we're actually doing all those innovations and everything like that, it will come hand in hand.
Okay, we covered a fair amount of ground, and as you say, you're 6 months in, so maybe in another year, well, maybe next year sometime we can catch up and see what else has gone on. But at least for now, really grateful for your time, some great insights. So thanks very much indeed, Ali. Thank you.
No problem, Phil. Thanks for allowing me to do it.
Thanks again.